moderator for today's session. We know project success doesn't happen by accident. It takes planning, communication, stakeholder alignment, and strong execution. So today's webinar is focused on practical strategies that organizations can use to better manage implementations and drive smoother project outcomes. So the overview and agenda for today, the session will be led by our project manager, Sanger Swan. Sanger will walk us through several key areas that play a major role in successful project delivery, including preparing stakeholders for success, defining requirements and project scope, managing expectations, timelines, and risks, communication strategies throughout a project, and best practices for smoother implementations. We'll also wrap up with key takeaways and a live Q&A session at the end. As you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll answer as we go, and we can also save questions for the end. If you don't have one during the presentation, there's no need to wait. I'll be monitoring questions throughout the session, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible, as well as during the Q&A portion. But if we run out of time or you'd like to discuss your environment in more detail afterward, our team is happy to follow up with you directly. And just a quick reminder, this meeting and session will be recorded so that we can view it again, and it will be posted on DocuNav's YouTube channel afterward. That way you'll be able to revisit the session and share it with other members of your team. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for taking your time out of your day to join us. We appreciate your partnership and participation. Sanger, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome, Parker. Thank you for that lovely intro. Hello, everybody. Good morning. Like I said, I see some familiar faces and names, so excited you are all here. For those of you who do not know me, I am Sanger Swan, one of the project managers here at DocuNav. I have had the pleasure to work with a lot of you, and I do hope that I also get the same pleasure to work with the ones I haven't worked with in the future. So as Parker mentioned today, I focus on project management, and so today I'm going to be going through how to manage your project, because we do love it when a plan comes together. It makes projects fun to work through, and of course, successful at the end. Okay. Been a project manager here for almost 2 years now, but I have been working in project management, specifically for Laserfish and records management, for almost 7 years at this point. So Laserfish, I know like the back of my hand. And records management has definitely been a big skill set of mine from the last decade here. All right. So today we're going to go through a few agenda topics, such as preparing your stakeholders, as this ensures project success always, defining your requirements so that a clear scope is documented early on. We're going to talk about managing those expectations, timelines, and risks, and then communication strategies throughout a project to ensure that everybody is constantly aligned. And then I'll finish out with some best practices for smoother project implementation and some key takeaways just so we can wrap up a quick summary. And as Parker mentioned, we will have a live Q&A after this, but please go ahead and drop any questions you have in the chat. Parker will be able to stop me if I need to answer a question right away. All right. So let's start with the foundation of all project planning. This is preparing your stakeholders, not only gathering them, but definitely preparing them as far as what is going to be involved within a project they may be a part of. So the first thing that we always love to recommend first is identifying the stakeholders that you are going to involve in a project. It's important to do this because every party is going to have some sort of role and influence in the project, as well as being affected by the said outcome of the project, whether they're going to be an end user or just somebody who's going to maintain continuous adoption. But nonetheless, identifying these stakeholders is important early on because it secures that buy-in to support the project's success. It helps prevent information or knowledge gaps, which definitely we've seen can cause some sort of project delay in the future, and it ensures that all the relevant needs, requirements, and constraints are considered for the project. Essentially, the right team that you develop, as in your stakeholders, will equal your project success. And the earlier you involve these stakeholders, it provides stronger buy-in. So better adoption and success outcomes in the end. But what are the type of stakeholders that you want to identify for your project? It depends on, of course, the project that you are going to go forward with. But some of the types of stakeholders that you can consider, or of course, is your executive sponsors. These could be your VPs or directors, right? The high-level individuals whose departments would really be using or affected by the project, by the solution that you're going to be implementing. These individuals from top down will be able to help with their department end user adoption in the end. But you also have those business or end users that are also a type of stakeholder for your projects, because these are more the individuals like your office or department administrators, right? These are going to be the individuals that really are going to be working with the product or solution or integration every day moving forward. So their buy-in, input, and considerations are extremely important in any sort of project. These essentially will become your testers, individuals that will be working with this, as I mentioned. Another type of stakeholder is, of course, your IT team or any sort of technical individual. These stakeholders are really important for most projects, as they're going to be individuals that have access to Laserfish servers or databases that, that may need to be looked up against. These could be individuals that have backend access to your third-party applications that Laserfish or DocuNav forms may need to look up to. These are also individuals that can assist with user access to any sort of product or platform. So their input is extremely important, and we would always recommend having some sort of IT or technical individual involved with your projects. And then the last stakeholder that we see are those external partners. These could be your third-party vendors, any other application that's maybe outside of the product that DocuNav is working on with you. So for example, conversion projects where you're moving records from one platform to Laserfish. We'll definitely want to have communication and input from the previous vendor. So if you have those vendor relationships, those are external partners that we would need to have involved with your project. Or these could be as simple as your parents in any like school district that would be using an external form that you'll need them to obviously fill out. Sometimes having, information and input from them and, at the beginning, if you're running a survey or something, can be extremely important because it'll help with that end user adoption if it's an external individual. And it'll help kind of bridge any gaps that maybe you can see for, parents, etc. But no matter what, every stakeholder that you choose for your project has a purpose, has a responsibility, and truly does provide the project's success. And it'll allow you to determine whose role and responsibility throughout the project is going to be, okay? Preparing your stakeholders also definitely means ensuring that communication is involved. What I mean by that is developing a communication plan for your stakeholders ensures any sort of mitigation need for roadblocks or risks, but it also promotes that continuous momentum forward on a project to reach that end goal. I'll talk a little bit more about communication strategies. But one thing DocuNav does when we partner with our clients here is we actually facilitate outlining those communication channels, such as implementing bi-weekly or weekly status meetings, providing you all weekly or monthly reporting if you need it, or just a quick, simple status update via email. This ensures that every stakeholder remains engaged and allows opportunities for further collaboration. This also, holistically will drive all alignment across stakeholders in the project team and allows opportunities for more decision-making alignment as well. So regardless of the communication plan that maybe your team needs to land on. This ensures that all stakeholders' voices are heard. That really gives them a more opportunity to take pride and ownership of the product or solution that is being implemented within that project. And this truly does help drive adoption as well. When communication is consistent, it mitigates any risks or roadblocks and really does drive that implementation adoption across the team. So once you have developed your stakeholders, right, it can be a number of different types of people, but once you have developed that team of your stakeholders, the next step in project planning truly is defining the needs and the requirements of the goal that you're looking forward to, because this will help implement a very clear scope of deliverables for your project. But before I get into how to gather requirements and develop a scope, let's talk a little bit about what our needs versus what our wants, because we love that long Christmas list, of course, but sometimes we do need to kind of reevaluate and figure out what the true needs are for a good, solid foundation. So when you are working with your stakeholders, truly understanding every individual's needs is the foundation. Like I said, your executive sponsors versus your end users may have different mindsets or outcomes that they're hoping for. And then your IT department or any sort of technical individual may also have a specific need for the outcome. So understanding everybody's needs, as in what is their goal, is highly recommended. These are your essential foundational requirements for the solution that we are trying to implement with y'all. And then those wants is that Christmas list I was talking about. These are definitely, the nice to haves, the fun features, the cool enhancements, but sometimes it doesn't make sense at the time, or maybe they're not feasible right away. But still listing them out helps understand what each stakeholder would like to see. In any case, it helps us at DocuNav partner with y'all to really clearly define a scope of work of those said deliverables for you guys. But my main, I guess, word there, but my main idea around needs versus wants is truly understanding the outcome of what you need, not just each individual little request. Really try and holistically see the big picture of what the stakeholder team needs. But this discovery and planning phase of any project, of course, ensures that every stakeholder's voice is heard, as I mentioned in the beginning. This does help with buy-in and adoption early. But this also, very importantly, prepares a clear scope of work that all teams, not only your team, but the DocuNav team can buy in all together. Right. So business requirements gathering is definitely probably the first big task for any project planning, as this may take some time, right? As you're talking to each stakeholder, gathering everybody's needs, you'll then need to clearly bring it all together and see what deliverables you will need. But to gather those requirements, there are tons of different strategies to do so. Methods that we've used or would suggest to use are one-on-one conversations, or almost like interviews, sitting down with every single stakeholder, understanding what it is they're looking for, their main goals, and then go through that Christmas list. What do they want to see? You can get as granular as possible, and truly the more granular you go at this planning phase, the better, because it'll help you kind of navigate, okay, what are the true needs versus what are their wants? Another method is sending out a survey or a questionnaire. I know that takes a little bit more time because you'll have to develop that, but it does allow you to collect documentation electronically, or if you're writing it on notes, it still allows you a way to collect that information. Or you can get everybody in the same room have that workshop focus group kind of collaboration where all your executive sponsors, end users, technical teams are involved together in one spot. Most often than not, that's probably the best way, only because that gets everybody in the room all at once and allows feedback collaboration with everybody. I know sometimes it can be a little difficult to get everybody in the room right away due to scheduling. So it's really up to your discretion how you want to go ahead and start gathering those requirements from your team. And then validating those requirements at the end of the gathering is highly important, as this will assist with developing that clear scope of work, in which case that's when DocuNav will come in and collaborate with your team. But you'll definitely need to analyze all that information. That'll make sure that you understand clearly the project goals, and it'll determine all of the needs early on. So what are you prioritizing? What are their top priorities? And then what are those nice to haves, that Christmas list? And then validating the requirements also allows you the opportunity before, DocuNav works with y'all to develop that scope. It allows you time to validate those requirements with your stakeholders before a project even starts. This allows for that adoption and buy-in, and allows or it mitigates any assumptions as to maybe there's something not clear, or maybe we need to understand a little bit more of why are you asking for this. This gives you that opportunity to realign with your stakeholders all together before starting a project with DocuNav. Right. And as I mentioned, DocuNav does partner with our customers to develop a clear scope of work. So usually what we'll do is we'll discuss with you after you've gathered your requirements, or maybe you haven't gathered your requirements quite yet. We always do scoping calls with our customers to align with those stakeholders and the project sponsor, right? So we'll go through what is the goal, and then what are the outcomes that are wanted, and then we'll go through more of those technical questions, the what ifs, all that with you. This will help clear up those assumptions, as I mentioned, make sure that any expectation is met, and then ensures that we have clearly defined your deliverables for your project. So this is definitely a foundational part of our partnership with our customers, because that scope of work is what the project managers here definitely will continue to look at throughout the project, just to ensure that we're always aligned, we're not missing anything, there's no gaps in knowledge, all that good stuff. So in the end, you are more than welcome to, and we would recommend that you start gathering those requirements with your stakeholders prior to scoping out your work with us. But we do use those project scope calls to develop your scope with you, okay? So we do that feedback together at the end of the day before a project starts. All right. Moving on here. One big topic is, of course, kind of management style across the project, managing expectations of your stakeholders, managing the timeline of your project, and of course, managing and mitigating any risk of a project. So we'll talk about expectations first, because this is really setting the tone of expectations for your stakeholders across the project, just to make sure everybody is aligned. So what does that look like? As I mentioned before, defining the scope clearly based on those requirements that were gathered, that helps prioritize buy-in of the stakeholders and ensures that the deliverables are clear and concise for you all, so nothing's missed. Those really become the expectations of the project, the foundation of the build and the implementation, those deliverables. When stakeholders agree to those deliverables, even agree to a project timeline, that sets the foundation of expectations of how the project is going to run as well. Additionally, documenting any assumptions, anything that could come up, will also help mitigate expectations that maybe kind of falling out of line of the scope of work. So documenting anything is always important. The PMs here, we document everything for everybody. But really these expectations help align stakeholders across the board. But the last bullet point here is the most important, I personally think, is setting the expectation of the level of effort or the time that stakeholders are going to need to be involved in the project. This is the biggest one, I think, because we can have a project that runs over a course of 4 months, but how much time do the stakeholders truly need to allocate themselves to ensure project success, right? This goes in line with, the meetings that we're going to have. How much time are they going to need to provide for meetings, or even, additional requirements gathering? How much time are they going to need to allocate to testing and training? And then, of course, what go live support does that look like, right? So the level of engagement during a project, I think, is the most important expectation that needs to be set, because this will help manage timeline of projects. It'll also help, manage, of course, resource availability as well. We all deal with holidays and out of office sick and, other priorities that, you folks may be running into. Setting that level of engagement is really important. And usually DocuNav project managers, when we do kick off with our customers, we'll usually set that expectation then. If not, that's already being discussed prior to the project starting, such as your scope creation, all that good stuff, okay? And then managing timelines, of course, is important in your project as well. Of course, these timelines are set for a purpose to ensure that delivery is efficient and successful on time. That really provides you your return on investment of the project, right? Your ROI. But this really is something that needs to be agreed upon, another kind of expectation around your stakeholders in the project team. This ensures, right, timelines are set realistically, not only based on the level of effort of the project, right? Because some projects can be quick and snappy. Some projects may take a course of a few months and over time. So we want to ensure that we understand the level of effort as well as the resource availability for the stakeholders, right? The time and effort they're going to need to take in a project. These timelines also set, as I mentioned, those due dates for your milestones, your deliverables. This ensures project delivery quickly, efficiently, and on time for y'all. Managing timelines isn't all about just setting, project dates and all that stuff. It really also includes consistent communication and touch points with the stakeholders or project teams. This ensures that actions are being done in time. This is an opportunity to discuss any blockers or risks as well to ensure that those are, taken care of so that we can keep moving forward on time. So managing timelines definitely is a big topic, but DocuNav PMs here, we are always in constant communication with our clients regarding timelines, and if things need to be shifted around, that's always a topic of communication where we will definitely help mitigate risks, etc. And on managing risks, which is another big topic, this is really a way to proactively identify, analyze, and of course, then respond to said risks to allow minimizing any sort of negative impact on a project timeline or a deliverable. Risks are inevitable, things happen, but as proactively as possible, that helps everybody, not just your project team, but ours, be able to move forward as efficiently as possible for that successful project implementation. So managing risks has have a few different ways that I'll discuss today. One, of course, is upfront brainstorming potential risks. So when you're in your requirements gathering phase for project planning, try and understand, okay, what are the risks with this versus that? What does that look like? What could that impact? Kind of trying to brainstorm some things up front could help address anything that may actually happen within the project. And of course, it brings awareness for everybody. So everybody can keep an eye out on that potential risk if it does come up. right? It allows more time to properly analyze and mitigate that. And of those risks, truly, again, evaluating the potential risk of that, such as, if this risk comes up, is that going to cause a late delivery of a milestone or the project entirety? Or is it going to create loss of resource or availability? For planning any strategies around handling these risks, there's also a few different ways, of course. But when risks come up, you have a couple different ways, such as, avoiding the risk altogether. So that upfront brainstorming that I mentioned in my first bullet point here, this really allows you to eliminate the risk entirely by modifying the scope or modifying the project timeline before project implementation or execution begins. Or you can mitigate the risk. This is really that proactive approach of constantly analyzing what's going on, so you can get an action before the risk truly explodes, right? This reduces risk as much as possible. Another plan is obviously transferring or shifting responsibility of risk from one party to another who can handle it, mitigate it, resolve it. And then, of course, sometimes you just got to accept the risk that's going to happen. Like I said, sometimes things are inevitable, it's going to happen, but you know it, and we know how to tolerate it, right? It's the expectation set of that risk. But nonetheless, throughout your project, the PMs at DocuNav alongside the project sponsors will continue to monitor any risk that comes up, make sure it's identified, and what strategy is being used to avoid it, mitigate it, transfer it, accept it. And some common risks that I just kind of want to lay out there. Obviously, there's a number of different ones, but some common ones that could come up is, of course, scope creep, right? This really aligns with the clear deliverables of your project, but if those wants, that Christmas list keeps kind of creeping up here, that can cause the risk of project delay, the timeline extending, potential resource availability loss, etc. Or scheduling risks. Maybe the timeline wasn't really realistic enough, or somebody unfortunately needs to be out of the office for an extended amount of time. Things of that nature can be inevitable, right? But scheduling risks can be documented and handled as well, such as resources risk as well, if said person is out, etc. And then there's those operational risks, right? These are the more kind of technical components, such as, a third-party vendor not being available, or, quality control issues in the testing phase. It can even be like technical failure, right? A server crashes, something goes down. These are all potential risks and common risks that I've personally seen through some projects, and that y'all might have already experienced in the past. But knowing and managing these risks do help with project success in the end. Okay. We'll talk about a little bit on communication strategies here in our projects. So obviously there's more than a number of ways that you can develop communication plans and channels, but just three kind of higher bucket levels of communication are the three here I've listed. There's that interactive communication. As I mentioned in the beginning of our presentation here, you can always set weekly or biweekly status calls here at DocuNav. We do partner with our customers to set that up for you. We do set that weekly or biweekly cadence depending on the level of effort the project does need. So that's your interactive communication. That's when you're all in one room, we're collaborating together, we're discussing the project. There's also the push type of communication. This is what you're kind of providing out to people, such as end of the week reports, or sometimes just a quick status email regarding the project status. And I would always suggest sometimes you got to think about the different stakeholders you're working with, right? Higher level executive sponsors may need a different style of communication versus end users who are really the ones testing and kicking the tires and will be using this. And then, of course, your technical teams may need a slightly different communication style as well, but you will know your stakeholders best. And DocuNav PMs, we always navigate and tailor the needs of each stakeholder as well. And then another style of communication is the pull communication, which is really a place where any and all documentation can be stored for your project team. So if you have some sort of like SharePoint or Google Drive, that's where you can save all your meeting notes, any recording or training documentation that we provide you. That allows your stakeholders kind of a one-stop shop to get any sort of documentation that they need to go back and reference, etc. But no matter what communication style across projects, this was something that I kind of learned in the past, but you have your 5 C's to really with communication styles, depending on the stakeholder and project, but ensuring your communication is always clear. Make sure that there's no assumptions left or questions outstanding. Making sure your communication is consistent, right? You're hitting that weekly or biweekly status call. You're constantly sending emails of updates, blockers, questions, and then making sure your communication is concise or clear, like I mentioned before, and courteous, making sure you're always professional and always kind with your communication. And then, of course, your credibility. Always provide as much facts as you can regarding your communication of your project status, blocker, or risk, right? Always have facts or things that the stakeholders in your project team can look back on. This is to allow better decision making or risk mitigation if needed. All right. Along the communication techniques here in projects, clear meetings, meeting efficiency really goes a long way, especially when you have a number of different stakeholders involved in a meeting. So here at DocuNav, when we do schedule out those weekly or biweekly cadence calls or status meetings, as you can call them, we always come handy with that agenda. So we want to make sure that your agenda is clearly defined. What topics are we going to be discussing on today's meeting? Ensuring a quick status update, right? The current health of the project or program that's being ran. We always want to review the next deadline, the next deliverable to ensure we're aligned on that timeline, right? And then addressing blockers and understanding any outstanding items. This helps mitigate that risk of project timeline delay or resource availability going away, etc. Addressing those blockers and understanding those outstanding items is always going to be a topic on an agenda. And then, of course, when you're wrapping up a meeting, we're always discussing the main takeaways, decisions, or even the next items such as actions and due dates. So meeting efficiency, it really helps keep your stakeholders engaged and doesn't hopefully let people linger out. But meeting efficiency, this is something that DocuNav does with our clients when we set up these weekly or biweekly status calls. We ensure that you guys have, an in-hand takeaway and email our documentation. All right. So a few best practices for smoother implementations. Of course, there's obviously many best practices, but before we get into those best practices, the foundation for a smooth implementation is project readiness. Project readiness really is that state of preparedness of your stakeholders or your project team and the resources surrounding the project for that level of effort. So this means that you are ready to start the project. You're ready to execute the solution to get to training and go live. This also means that you and your stakeholders, as well as the DocuNav project team, are aligned on the scope. We understand the clear deliverables. There's no assumptions. Everybody's expectations are set and aligned. And then, of course, resource availability. That means your stakeholders and project teams are ready to go. They're available. They understand the time they're going to need to set aside for the project, as well as the DocuNav team. We're ready to go as well with you, right? We have the engineer resource availability as well. So it's a collaboration of project readiness. And just a couple things that you can kind of check off as you're kind of understanding, okay, are we actually ready for the project? Just a couple things here, kind of as I've already mentioned throughout our presentation today, but if you have that clear objective and you've got that clear scope based on those requirements, you're checked off, you're ready there. You have your defined roles and responsibilities of your stakeholders. Once you gather that team, boom, you're checked there. Then that resource availability. Are your stakeholders ready? Do they understand the level of effort needed of each and every one of them for the project? You can check that off, and that means you're ready. As well as establishing communication channels. This can even be done before you are assigned a DocuNav PM. You and your project team can always set those internal meeting cadences as well, right? This allows you that flexibility with everybody's schedule for working sessions, etc. And then, of course, last but not least, stakeholder buy-in and engagement, those expectations set. Is everybody involved? Is everybody bought in? Is everybody on the same team? All of this wrapped up together ensures and defines that you are ready for your project. Okay, but here are some common readiness gaps that we've seen and that you should be aware of as well. Sometimes when you are going through that checklist of project readiness, it may showcase that, oh, I might have a missing stakeholder. I might have somebody who would need to bring value to this project. You definitely want to ensure that that individual is brought in as early as possible before a project starts. Sometimes it happens where you pull them in when the project starts, getting them up to speed may take some time. It may delay the project, and or if that stakeholder comes in late in the game, they may have a totally different idea and goal of where the project needs to go, which then can delay the project. It may place the project on hold. It may require, a change order of the scope of deliverables, etc. So that's why that foundation of setting your stakeholders early on is highly important. But this could potentially be a readiness gap for a project if there's a missing stakeholder. Unrealistic timelines. What does that mean? This could potentially mean that the project is set at a very, very quick pace that doesn't allot enough time truly for adoption or, enough QA, QC time for the teams to ensure testing is efficient enough. Setting an unrealistic timeline of a project can definitely delay what I would say those deliverables. If things need to be implemented too quickly, it could also ensure, or it can also kind of allow, how do I say, inefficient adoption. People are scrambling to get things done and therefore scrambling to get things used. And therefore, when a product goes live, a lot of technical issues may arise because there wasn't enough time to properly implement QC and test. Another common readiness gap is the lack of resources, right? You may have your stakeholders set, but they're not available, right? Maybe it's a finance department and they're going through auditing, right? We would probably suggest waiting until the auditing is completed so they have that time to allocate to the project. That was just one example I had on the top of my head. And then the last one I have bulleted here is unmanaged expectations. The scope wasn't clearly reviewed with the stakeholders once those requirements were gathered. That's the biggest one, because then they're probably thinking of their Christmas list other than the foundational deliverables that were agreed upon between, your project team and the DocuNav team. But essentially, all in all, that project readiness, that checklist I said to go through, that really helps prevent as many disruptions in the project as possible and ensures your project delivery is efficient. And as I mentioned in the past, of course, we always like to focus on that return of investment for you folks, right? You're coming to us to create a solution to help your team, to help your department, to help your parents in a school district. And we want to ensure that you see the value in the project deliverable. So making sure you're ready helps us provide that to you guys in no time. Okay. And the last thing regarding these continuous slides are those best practices. And these are just a few, some things that I wanted to obviously have written out for y'all. And I've definitely talked about these throughout the presentation, but best practices to ensure a smoother project, kind of the same thing. Hope I don't sound like a broken record here, but reviewing that scope and those goals early on and continuously before the scope is created, even on project kickoff, that ensures consistent alignment across your stakeholders and both your team and the DocuNav team. The PMs here, we're always going back to that scope of work to make sure that we are aligned, we're hitting everything. So always reviewing the scope and goals. Ensuring that you have a developed, detailed plan. Again, that's one way DocuNav partners with y'all on your projects is we ensure that we break down those key deliverables, we set those milestones and checklists, and then we ensure that a realistic timeline upon your needs as well as resource availability of your team is set so that we can get to that goal, that end date, that implementation for y'all right away. Another best practice, as we discussed in the past, is those proactive risk management styles, making sure things are documented, things are monitored, and we are attacking those risks early on as possible to help hopefully not go into any project delays. And then another big best practice is document, document, document. I love a good documentation. Documenting anything from your decision making, decisions we come out of agendas and meetings that we have with y'all, documenting those risks. That's part of your risk management. Documenting any changes, because sometimes changes are inevitable in a project. We would document that, talk to you about the why, what is actually needed, and go through that change order process. And then, of course, documenting progress, right? Giving you guys the statuses of the project, of what's left, what's outstanding. And that goes into the last best practice, which is that continuous communication with stakeholders. That ensures everybody always stays aligned. There's nothing missed. Everybody know what's upcoming, what's due, what's outstanding, and that can be set via your email cadence, those meeting cadences that the PMs here align with you all on. And it can even be in reporting, say that you develop or the PM develops for your project team. And of course, all of this wrapped up helps with best and smooth project implementation. Okay, so just some key takeaways that I'm going to summarize today. And I'm sure there might be some more that you picked out and that stuck with you today. But the key takeaways that I discussed, again, is really engaging your stakeholders early on. Early on allows early adoption and a continuous alignment for you all, and ensures that that stakeholder's voice is heard, and that provides them some more pride in the product, in the project that they're going to be implementing with us. Another one is validating the needs and requirements before execution, right? When you're gathering all those requirements, making sure that you're reviewing those goals, those needs with your stakeholders so a clear scope can be defined. And then ensuring readiness before a project starts, right? Going through that checklist, making sure, do I have all my stakeholders? Do I have a realistic timeline? Do I have my clear scope and requirements? All that good stuff. And then throughout the project, even at the beginning and to the end, consistent communication. Never leave too much time in between communication, ensuring that you have those weekly or bi-weekly meetings. You're sending out emails if a risk blocker, etc., comes up. You want to tackle that right away. But communication consistently ensures that there's always alignment and no misunderstanding. Okay. So that leads me to the end of the presentation today. I hope you learned a lot and understand how the DocuNav team here aligns and collaborates with you all for a smooth and awesome project. But I do want to open it up for some questions, see if there's anything that's come up. Please ask away. And if you don't have any questions right away, that's totally okay. I'm always available to answer questions.
This is your chance, folks. Singer's a great resource for questions and answers. It's a good time to get those in. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to ask away offline, and she's happy to help answer those as well.
And some of this stuff may not be new to some folks. If you've ran projects before or have worked with our PMs before, some of this may be new and you need some time to digest it. But yeah, as Parker mentioned, we're always here to answer questions. I'll give you a couple minutes for sure.
And while y'all are thinking of those questions, I want you to go ahead and mark your calendars for May 27th, where we'll be troubleshooting process diagrams, looking at avoiding errors by mapping workflow logic correctly. This session is ideal for system admins, developers, and power users who build or maintain workflows in Laserfish.
All right, I guess we have a shy group here, and that's totally okay. For those of you that I've worked with before, you definitely know how to find me. My email is out there. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask any questions regarding best practices, project management, all that good stuff. And Parker and team, I believe the slide will be up for everybody and the recording as well. So you always have something to look back on as a resource. And of course, always go out to your customer success manager for any questions regarding a future project thought, a current project in flight, anything of that sort. They're always there for you as well.
That's correct. Thank you, Singer. We'll have this posted to our YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. And with that, I hope y'all have a great day. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the 27th for troubleshooting process diagrams. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.